Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Now, Nigeria, one of Africa's superpowers and the economic engine of the subcontinent, closed all its land borders 3 months ago to tackle smuggling. But the unprecedented move is badly affecting trade across the region. Once bustling borders have come to a standstill, with many goods said to be rotting and queues of lorries stranded at checkpoints. The closures were imposed without warning. In August, the Nigerian government was simply fed up about the flouting of its ban on the importation of rice over its land borders. The biggest contraband route is apparently between Cotonou in neighboring Republic of Benin and Lagos, Nigeria's commercial hub, which is just a few hours' drive away. According to the World Bank, Benin's economy is heavily reliant on the informal re-export of transit trade with Nigeria, which accounts for about 20% of Benin's GDP. But it's not just rice. Benin is also a major corridor for second-hand cars to Nigeria, where there is a ban on importing cars that are more than 15 years old. But the ban has hit not just Benin, but Nigeria's immediate neighbours, including Niger, Chad, Ghana, Cameroon, and Togo. And they are understandably miffed. We'll talk about all that in a moment, but first, here's the governor of Nigeria's central bank, Godwin Emefiele, justifying the border closures in an exclusive interview with Arise News.
Before the border closures, I received a call from the president of the Rice Processors Association. He said, Governor, because the President Buhari said we should all go into production of rice for the good of our country so we can feed ourselves and conserve foreign exchange, you have used through the banks lent interventions funds to us who have expanded our factories. After expanding our factories, before border closures, most of them were carrying nothing less than 20,000 metric tons of milled rice, parboiled rice in their factories they couldn't sell. After that, the president of Rice Farmers Association called and said, Governor, you gave us Anchor Borers program loan. It may be difficult for us to repay your Anchor Borers program loan because we have paddy that cannot be sold because the millers are not buying paddy from us. Do something about it. Poultry farmers called us. They said they were carrying thousands of crates of eggs that could not be sold. Charles, eggs were being smuggled into this country. Tomatoes being smuggled into this country. What can this country produce if we could smuggle eggs into this country? We are smuggling chicken into this country. Chicken wings is what we are smuggling into this country. And all these were killing our own industries and then making people lose their jobs. These are some of, and after border closure, everybody's overwhelmingly shouting, thank God these borders have been closed. The rice farmers, you will see what will happen to the harvest of paddy this year. Go between Kabuja and Kaduna, most of the farms, even owned by not even people who are under our Anchor Bora program, itinerant farmers, right? People who have jobs and who are just going to farming are all growing rice. You will see what will happen to the bumper. When the bumper goes up, paddy is being sold. The mills are in operation. You create jobs for our people. The industries are back to life. Prices, supply will go up. Prices will come down. That is what happens.
The governor of Nigeria's central bank there, Godwin Emefiele, in that exclusive interview with Arise News. And you can see the rest of that interview on Friday. That's tomorrow at 1600 GMT, which is 5 p.m. Nigerian time. Well, for more on the impact of the closure of Nigeria's land borders on trade, I'm joined now in the studio by the development economist Basil Emegwaram, and by the Abuja Bureau Chief for the Guardian newspaper, Igho Akeriga. Thank you very much indeed to both of you for coming in. And I'll start with you, Basil. Just remind us from the perspective of the ordinary person in Nigeria, why the Nigerian government decided to take this unprecedented action of closing its land borders. What prompted that move?
There are so many things that happened, but let's narrow them to the few that were more cogent or more urgent. Security, and the fact that revenue import tariffs that are being lost to neighboring countries. And you could understand, as the governor already said, that it discouraged our farmers from competing with goods that come half-priced, substandard, expired goods, especially rice, rebagged and things like that. I think government was forced by revenue more than security, because they got to the point that the economy is actually has revenue crisis, and there's no way they can fund their budgets. So I'm sure they now became more novel and the thinking out of the box. So that's what I think that happened. But I have said this in time without number. Look, if you look at the history of economic development for nations, starting from 1489, where Henry VII of England, King Henry VII of England, bound the export of raw material for making wools to the lower countries, Netherlands and
Yes.
Belgium
and so on,
and
Antwerp.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
And what happened eventually was 100 years later, Britain became England, because then it was not Britain, became the center point for manufacturing, and eventually ended up to become the first
Industrial powerhouse.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So then you look at the United States in 1792, Alexander Hamilton, the first Treasury Secretary, as soon as America became independent, blocked British American borders and said no foreign whales, then they call them whales, should enter America. So we start what they call infant industrialization. That is how it came about. You know, in a very simple economic term, because he wasn't an economist, and he told Adam Smith, "I'm not interested in economics. Economics is the pro international trade. We cannot engage in international trade when you have more advantage than America."
So in other words, you support what the government
Of course,
has
I'm
done.
supporting it, and I'm one of the people that we say, let's close this border as long as it will take for us to stop being suffocated. Look at in 1861, the last opium war.
Briefly, because I've got to go to Mr.
The last
America.
opium war of 1861, that Europe and America fought against China was then the largest economy to force China to open its borders so that Western manufactured goods could enter China.
Well, I mean, that fight is still going on. But let me bring in Mr. Akeriga there, because he's talked about a lot of things, but obviously some of these things happened at a different time. I mean, the 15th century England, 18th century America. What impact has this border closure had? I understand that borders that once bustled with trade have now virtually come to a standstill.
Well, apparently, the closure of the borders, that is the closure of the Nigerian border with the neighboring countries, is long overdue. It is so because, the federal government has evolved a couple of economic policies, including the ERGP, Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. Now, if you want to grow your economy, and then you allow the influx of all kinds of goods and service commodities coming into your country, even things that you could produce within the country, just coming in unrestrained, clearly that policy cannot
Yeah, but
work.
what about a situation where you're not actually producing enough goods to sustain the demand within your country, particularly agricultural goods? What happens
Well,
then?
there are also clear economic policies. If you look at even China, for example,
Right.
China has to shut its borders to force local production, all right? Because if you say you don't wait until you're able to produce sufficiently before you can control the influx of agricultural goods and services, So what this government has done, it is applauded eternally by Nigerians who understand.
So Nigerians agree with it.
Of course, most Nigerians agree
Right,
with it,
okay.
because we're actually suffocating under the heavy yoke of this unrestrained importation of all kinds of things, including even expired chicken. You see the customs services having to destroy a couple of these poultry products a lot of times. You even also see drugs, fake drugs, coming through the borders into Nigeria, because some of the fake drugs we have in the country are not actually brought in through the airport, because the airports are better controlled.
Yes.
It's a better controlled.
But then talking about better control, Basil, because I've heard it expressed by quite a lot of people, particularly security people, security analysts and so on, saying, well, okay, you're talking about land borders, the official land borders. What about the borders? I mean, you've got, you know, stretches of border that are completely unpoliced.
Fantastic. I'm happy you asked this question, and I wish government could listen. In 2013, I went to China. I normally visit China, and the Chinese government took me to a remote area. It was a desert area. And when we landed, after we took a helicopter and went to a very remote area, and they took me to a very beautiful place, but underground. And I saw a very large screen. And they said, from here we monitor all our borders. Even a butterfly passing, we capture it. Technology is there. It's able to geopeg individuals, and the helicopter will be taken quickly to follow those people until you capture them. As soon as you do it for some months, people will stop.
Yes.
It's not a rocket science. The problem is that we must, if you do not man your borders, then we are not actually a sovereign nation.
Absolutely, that's a good point.
So we must do that. And look, I'm not trying to say it here, but I have already something I can give the government to the way they want to use it. There's a particular type of spy cameras that can actually do 10 kilometers. That do 10 kilometers. So when you put those spy cameras about 200 or 300 meters, you can monitor what happens because it geopegs all activities. And even the president of Nigeria can be given the screen through which he will say what is happening.
Well, the problem with Nigeria is that they start something and then it's never seen through. Because after all, that was part of the reason why satellites were launched. Nigeria built an Earth satellite, a communication satellite, launched all of them. And you wonder what on earth happened to those things.
And also, you award the contract for the benefit, not actually for the national interest. But let me leave that and go to rice, because you talked about rice. You know, during the past 2 months, I have received letters of intent from some of the richest Nigerians that can I help them to put together a business plan with all the value chain and value propositions on rice. And it's shocking. Now, Zamfara in particular is mapping out 600,000 hectares of land for rice farming.
Okay, let me ask you to hold that thought. I'll come back to you once we've taken a break. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our assessment of the impact of the closure of Nigeria's land borders on regional and national trade. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Aniegolu. Now, Nigeria will keep its land borders closed to trade until at least the end of January 2020, according to the government. The country launched a partial border closure in August to tackle smuggling of rice and other goods, but subsequently Nigeria's head of customs confirmed that all trade via land borders had been halted. The Customs Service said the present phase would end on January 31st, but that would not necessarily be the end of the closure. The blockade has had a ripple effect across West Africa, with factories and traders struggling to import key raw materials and having to use alternative routes for their exports, according to the Lagos Chamber of Commerce. But the Nigerian authorities insist that the closure and the extension are necessary to achieve the government's strategic objectives, and that the operation has resulted in security and economic benefits. Well, with me in the studio, the development economist Basil Emegwaram and the Abuja bureau chief for the Guardian newspaper, Igho Akeriga. Thank you for staying with us. You were talking about rice earlier, and whilst you're talking about that, also mention what you consider to be the benefits so far, because I mean it appears to be just taking place over a few months, and I wonder if any benefits are being recorded.
Of course. Let me tell you, in economics, when there's a demand gap, you must eventually see inflation. But it is good because that demand gap is what attracts investors. Because all investors want to do is to fill that gap. Of course, unfortunately for investors, they overfill the gap and the price drops. So I will assure you, with states like Zamfara mapping out 600,000 hectares of land for rice farming, which is going to biggest rice famine, one of the biggest rice famine in the world.
If it happens.
If it happens, anyway. And I will assure you that we feed Nigeria. It will be enough to feed Nigeria. So why can't we agree that we need to take the little pain right now so that in the next 1 year or even less than 1 year, all these things will take place? And I'm not even looking at West African countries as they're going to bear the brunt. It is exporters of rice from Thailand and Malaysia and all those countries, China and India, that are going to really bear that.
And of course, the problem, Mr. Kerriga, for Nigeria was also that Benin, for example, which is Nigeria's neighbor, lowered its tariffs on rice imports from 35% to 7%. And Cameroon erased it completely from 10%. And so smugglers saw a brilliant opportunity to bring it in through those countries.
Yeah, and that quickly it brings us to the point of the countries that are complaining now. They are complaining because they clearly obliterated their tax regime so that they can then bring this rice into Nigeria, and then, of course, Nigerians will consume, and then there will be any free money, free income. So that it doesn't work anywhere. Don't forget, the 15 countries that makes up the ECOWAS sub-region, there are about 349 total population of the ECOWAS sub, 349 million persons. And out of these 349 million, the trade volume within the sub-region, Nigeria alone accounts for 76% of the trade volume within the sub-region, I think followed by Cote d'Ivoire and all that. Now, all of this brings us to the fact that what the policy that Nigeria has just implemented is the right one, though it's even overdue, because if you look at the onset of this regime in 2015, this administration in 2015, you had a growing inflation in terms of even the value of the naira was spiraling almost out of control. All of that was happening because even the things that we could produce, we were importing. And then we were using the dollar to, the dollar to naira ratio became, just something that you couldn't really define or put your fingers on.
Good point.
Until the government on its own just realized that we can't continue on this roller coaster, while saying that how do you actually even ask your local farmers to grow rice, develop poultry farms and all that, then you still allow all of these same products to come in unrestrained.
It defeats the whole point,
So it is the right
course,
steps to be taken by the
but of
government.
course the reason, Dr. Megwara, the rice was making its way into Nigeria was to meet a shortfall in local production in a country with 200 million people. And presumably, the border closures have not filled that shortfall.
What do you mean by that?
Well, Nigeria was not able to produce enough rice to feed its people, therefore it was importing it. Closing the borders has not affected that shortfall. There is still a shortfall, isn't there?
No, my brother, I think you have to understand that when you do investment, I've given you an example of 600.
No, I understand, but that's a potential.
No,
that's not an actual. That's
so many people are now.
Real.
You see, when there is a gap, remember the Biafran Civil War. When it happened, over a period of time, because necessity is the mother of invention, people have to adjust.
People became innovative.
Exactly, innovative. So what I'm looking at, let me tell you the truth of the matter. I'm in favor of this, and I'm in favor of this. What we shall tell West African neighbors and the Central African neighbors. Look, custom union is what we need. Let Nigerian custom officials be part of your own custom and monitor all the things that enter your ports. If anything that enters your port, we tag them. As soon as they enter Nigeria, they want to transit to Nigeria, we stop them because the tag system, and that's what I want to suggest the government. All this is very simple. As soon as they want to enter Nigerian border, the tag will trigger it to show you that the goods that are moving are actually not made in those countries.
Right.
So as soon as we do that, we open the borders and we stop all these things because Nigeria cannot be at the receiving end for as long as these countries want. So you will see, my brother, before this time next year, will be the one to call me that Nigeria is even trying to export rice.
Right. Okay, let me bring you in again, Mr. Kerriga, who's Abuja Bureau Chief for the Guardian newspaper. Let's look at this from a legal point of view, because that argument has been raised by other ECOWAS members. The ECOWAS agreement guarantees free movement of goods within the ECOWAS regional bloc, does it not? So is this move by Nigeria illegal?
Well, part of the arguments really that is the strongest amongst the countries, particularly Ghana. Ghana is pushing very hard on that argument. Ghana is talking about the ECOWAS protocol on the free movement of persons and goods across the region. But those who are pushing this argument also forget that there is a clause. If you
Yes,
read,
that is true.
Yeah, there is a clause that
that you can restrict the importation of goods, certain goods,
yeah,
and agricultural
if you
products.
feel that it is hurting your economy,
Right.
or if you feel using, trying to
And that's
also
the clause that
evaluate the
Nigeria
local
is
environment,
depending
of
on.
course.
Right.
And so Nigeria has not broken any international protocol, as they claim, as it were. For example, look at the influx of small arms into the country. These small arms are not coming in through the air. They are presumably coming in through maybe through the sea borders and our land borders, but mostly to the land borders, really, because intelligence reports have proven that a lot of these small and light weapons are coming in from across Libya to Niger, Mali, and then all of these are land borders. And you now wait until all of the population of Nigeria is wiped out before you realize that laws are made for men and not meant for the laws. If the protocol, a good protocol, not that, because it's supposed to promote regional integration, cultural exchanges, economic growth and development in the sub-region. But if all of that is beginning to also have a side effect on a particular country, I think the country reserves the
Okay, let me just ask you this, because we've got about 90 seconds left, so you have to try and be sort of fairly circumspect. And of course, inevitably, this action is also raising questions about Nigeria's commitment to the Africa after the free trade agreement across Africa. What are your thoughts on that?
For me, the African free trade must have caveats. If we have not put that caveat, goods must be 100% made in the country of departure to the next country.
Right. And that's the problem with Benin.
Yes.
Right.
Two is that countries can stop goods entering if they believe those goods are substandard, are harmful to the health of their citizens. This is what Nigeria is going to use, because South Africa is just dancing. We're going to make sure we use, first of all, what is called a social footprint or ecological footprint. We can say this is having an ecological and social footprint because of unemployment is generated in Nigeria. We are importing goods but exporting jobs. So there are so many caveats we're going to put there. Those people who want to bring substandard goods or manufacture those and up in Nigeria, we're going to show them that this country has come to stay.
Are you sure you're not a headmaster or something?
I'm not a headmaster of anything. I'm telling you that we must manufacture this.
No, I understand what you mean.
If we don't do that, Nigeria will be on fire. Unemployment in this country has no way to solve it.
But I should also add that
very briefly.
Yes, Nigeria must also step up its infrastructure development, because we cannot continue to blame other countries when our electricity, there's paucity of electricity and power,
yielding
that is
to the
supposed to
development
drive
of local
industrialization.
industries. Listen, I have to say thank you very much indeed. Very, very interesting conversation. The development economist Basil Emegwaram and the Abuja Bureau Chief for the Guardian newspaper Igho Akeriga. Well, that's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again for a fresh edition tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye and thank you for watching.